The FBI just arrested someone for streaming fraud and confirmed something that a lot of people have been speculating about in recent years. But what does the FBI have anything to do with Spotify? Well, if you've ever released a song on Spotify, this relates to you way more than you think.
You are watching Sound Learn.
Last year I made a video about something sketchy going on with Spotify involving potentially thousands of AI-generated songs suddenly popping up all over the place. When I was making that video, I dug as deep as I could to find out what was really going on. But at the time, the most I could do was speculate. Nothing I found could definitively prove that actual fraud involving AI and bot farms was happening. But now we have definitive proof that Spotify is indeed hosting hundreds of thousands of AI-generated songs created for the sole purpose of streaming fraud through the use of bots. On Wednesday, September 4th, 2024, Michael Smith, a 52-year-old man from North Carolina, was arrested and charged with fraud and conspiracy charges. Charges that could potentially lead up to 60 years in prison. So how exactly did we end up here? And what are the implications of all of this? How does this affect independent musicians like you and I? I made a longer, more in-depth video about how this streaming fraud works that I highly recommend you check out, but for now, I'll just give you a quick recap. This particular streaming fraud scheme works like this. The culprit creates thousands of songs a day using AI, which are really just slight variations of the same song with altered samples, and generally just over a minute long so that they can qualify for streaming revenue. The culprit then creates or hires a bot farm, basically just thousands of cheap computers running fake Spotify accounts that literally just loop a targeted song or playlist to artificially boost streams. Artists get paid on a per stream basis, so the idea is if you force enough plays on a particular song, it will eventually begin to generate money. Spotify, in theory, has safeguards against botted songs. If you were to, for example, release a song and pay a bot farm a few $100 to stream that song over and over, Spotify would quickly catch on to the fact that these streams are coming from the same place and they're streaming at a perfectly steady, unrealistic pace. As soon as bot activity is detected, Spotify will quickly demonetize the song and potentially even take down the artist from the platform entirely. The problem is that to circumvent this, one could, in theory, spread out the AI-generated music and bot streams amongst thousands of fake artists. To further obscure the bot activity, the culprit could then create massive playlists that only include their own AI-generated artists and target those playlists rather than an individual song. And at this point, it's nearly impossible for Spotify to detect that any one particular song is getting botted because ultimately the bot streams are being spread out amongst thousands of songs instead of just one. The final piece of the puzzle is the fact that all of these fake artists live under the same umbrella. There are a ton of music distributors that allow you to sign up as a label rather than just as a single artist. This means you can create infinite artists under your label, and when all the streaming revenue gets paid out, it gets paid out to the label rather than the artist. So now that we understand how it works, just how bad was it? I mean, a potential 60 years in prison for botting some music on Spotify? Well, it's worse than I thought, at least. He apparently created tens of thousands of songs and had set up enough bots to be able to generate roughly 661,000 fake streams per day. That's over 500,000 streams per day, likely spread out over thousands of fake artist profiles. Before getting caught, he was apparently making about $1.2 million a year on average from this racket. And to add to that, he allegedly had been running this setup since 2018. So in total, the estimate streaming revenue payout since he started had added up to over $12 million in royalties. Just think about that for a second. It's not surprising why Spotify and the FBI would want this guy locked up. When I first saw this headline, I had mixed feelings. On one hand, I felt validated that I wasn't just going down this conspiracy theory rabbit hole when I was researching my last video on this topic. On the other hand, it gave me this really unsettling feeling because this hints at something a bit more sinister. The idea that there may be hundreds, if not thousands of other individuals running a similar racket really just is unsettling. To put it further into context, when you sign up for Spotify Premium, a small part of your $12 a month gets thrown into a giant metaphorical well that is responsible for artists getting paid their fair share for the streams they get on their music. To oversimplify it, if the royalty well only has $100 and there are exactly 100 artists, and each artist only gets one single stream, Each artist would only receive a single dollar from that well. In reality, however, there's obviously some artists that are more popular than others, and hence get a bigger share of the money from the well. To use the same example, if we have 99 artists still only getting one stream, but then one mega popular artist gets 1,000 streams, the mega popular artist would get $90.91, while the remaining 99 with just one stream would end up getting paid $0.092, which is like a fraction of a penny. So once you understand how the payouts work with Spotify, and any other streaming platform for that matter, you start to see the big problem. Could it be that this type of fraud is much more rampant than we think? If there are single individuals who are siphoning millions of dollars from the metaphorical well we all drink from as artists with fake music and fake listeners, how will Spotify remain a sustainable place for independent artists to release their music? It's easy to point the finger at Spotify as a corporate entity and blame them for terrible payouts that have only decreased over time. And trust me, they definitely aren't innocent when it comes to greed. But what if it's a bit more complex? What if there's something going on behind the scenes that Spotify is aware of, but has no idea how to deal with? If we want to get really conspiratorial, there are even some people out there suggesting that Spotify themselves could be participating in streaming fraud to further lower the payout pool and keep more revenue for themselves. I want to be really clear and state that this isn't something that anyone has confirmed is happening, and I personally don't believe they would go that low and risk those kind of serious legal issues, but it does beg a bigger question. How is this sustainable? How can Spotify, a publicly traded company, continue to increase profit margins in the long term when stuff like this is happening more and more frequently? How will Spotify convince artists to stay on their platform if the payouts just keep getting lower and lower? For now, it's hard to say, but I generally try to always end things on an optimistic note. I think it's far too easy to just fall into pessimism and assume that the music industry is dead and that independent artists are forever screwed. I don't think it's that bad. My personal guess is that the future will have to change, and I think it's probably going to look a little bit more community driven, kind of like how YouTube came to be. A place where the success of music is curated by a combination of the algorithm and audience engagement. Artists with high user engagement outside of just streaming could have a bigger share of the royalty pool, for example. Get a ton of discussion on a song, more shares for you. Sell more merch through the platform, more shares for you. It's not perfect, but a platform like that could potentially make it so that music with zero real engagement, like a botted AI-generated song, would be throttled in terms of how many royalties they can receive. But, what do I know? I'm just speculating here. Maybe it's gonna get worse before it gets better. We'll see. I hope not. But I guess the fact that they are catching on to the fact that this is happening is worth something. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Has this remotely affected you as an artist? Have you seen your payouts get lower? I know I have. Let me know.